Hey folks, Les here, aka 6S1, to show you some usage tips and rigging tips and all kinds of cool stuff about the evening dress kit here at DAS that was just released. So we're going to go ahead and look at the scene we have, where we have a Genesis 8 female already loaded into the scene, and I'm just going to click on her and double click my load all for the evening dress, and that's going to load everything in, get it all parented, also position her properly for the shoes, and all of the same settings that are applied when using that get applied when using any of the individual settings from the library. So I'm just going to use that so that we can kind of hit the ground running. The big thing that I want to take a moment and show you that's a little different in this than perhaps some of the other clothing packages you might be familiar with is the way that the dress is set up. It's been an ongoing thing that I've heard from users through the years and artists working with this. Always looking for new and better ways to control long flowing cloth. And then of course in DAS Studio we have dforce, which is great, which gives us simulation. So a lot of times though you get conflicts between sculpted morphs and simulation and the underlying rigging. So what I've come up with is kind of an approach of using deformers, which I know is kind of old tech in DAS Studio, but I'm applying them in a way that may be a little different than the norm. I haven't ran across anyone else doing it this way. So I wanted to show you that because really you won't even have to touch the deformers. What I'm doing is if we select the dress, okay, and I'm just right clicking in the viewport, selecting the dress, and then we go into our parameters, you'll see we have just a ton of these pose controls. Now, if I go into my parameters tab and I turn off consolidate properties, you'll see it just looks like, you know, bend, shift, and side to side and twist. All those are just repeated over and over. You want consolidate properties turned on, and that's going to allow us some interesting ways of actually making use of just a fundamental way DAS Studio works. And essentially what happens is if you have multiple body parts selected, or you have multiple instances of parameters with the same names all inside a selection, then with consolidate properties turned on, it will look at all of them at the same time. So here right now you can see if I click on pose controls, this group, then we have 24 parameters available for bending for each of these. There's 24 different not copies, but 24 different instances of parameters with those names on all of the things that have their controllers listed here in this section. Now what each of these actually is, these are all actually the controllers on deformers that are embedded and hidden, so you don't have to ever see them or think about them. And I've kind of went through and locked them all inside certain tolerances so that they work a certain way, and then when these aliases to their controls are placed here in the pose controls, it gives you access to them, and those will operate in such a way they look like morphs, but they're not morphs because they're actually using deformers, and that sort of sits in parallel with the rigging. And I know that could be kind of confusing to think about. You don't have to worry about any of the technical stuff behind that. That's what I've done for you. What's going on here that I really want to show you is just how to approach it as a user and really make the most out of this. So let's say we have a bend in her leg. Let's bend the thigh back a bit, maybe move that over. And here you can see our dress has nice fundamental rigging already built into it. But then let's add a little bit of movement with our embedded controls. So here you can see we have the knot, and that's the knot in the belt. And we can do quite a bit with that. You could also select the knot and control it just like any other body part. I really like that. And you can even use the translate tool to kind of push and pull it around. So that gives you a lot of options just in that body part alone. Now let's go take a look at the belt. And it's very important to remember that when you're using this control scheme, I'm actually making use of the way grouping works here in the parameters as a feature instead of just an organizational element. What I mean by that is here, and this is a really great example of this, with the left belt end, for example, if I click on just that master group and I go over here and we can see that we have 4 side-to-side parameters available, okay, and I swing that around, you see that it's going to operate on all of those. Or I can open this up and go in and work on each one by one. So this gives us just a really exhaustive amount of control. There's a lot that can be done with that. So I accidentally restored the figure there for a second. I didn't mean to do that. That's why it popped and then I hit the undo. So if we look at the loops, these have the same sort of thing. And just the way that the parameters can be accessed as groups like this and different amounts of them. Let's say we wanted to work with just belt end 3 and 4. If you select both of those, we just drag over them. Or we could do 1 and 3 by holding the control key and clicking. By virtue of having all of these parameters set up this way and grouped this way, you can actually use the ability to select groups here in this side of the parameters pane as a tool. So if we go to the right loop here, if I drag side to side on that, and then if I click down here, you'll see what it's done inside each of those subsequent joints. And then here we can just restore that back. So that's an example on the belt. If we look at the dress, we have a number of options inside here. So let's say the front left on the dress. I've included both rotational controls so that we can see how far we can blow that, and you see it doesn't conflict with the underlying rigging. That's the thing that's really super cool about this. It doesn't have the same conflict, because if you're doing morphs, if you're using sculpted morphs, those morphs are trying to push the vertices in straight vectors. And that's always going to read after the rigging. So no matter what, it's trying to move from point A to point B, but you've had a rotation that causes it to go somewhere else, and things can get really screwy. With this, the way deformers work, and I really like this, is they sit in parallel to the rigging. They can follow a joint, and then they can add layers of deformation on top of that. So I'm really capitalizing on that here by adding those in this way, and then kind of customizing all kinds of things about the controls and placing them all to be organized in such a way that you get this nice control scheme that allows you to use these kind of deformations in parallel with the underlying rigging. And it also works with simulation. And once it's simulated, these things still work. So oftentimes if you try to combine simulation with a morph, then once it simulates, you'll see that the morphs just come out broken because all the vertices have moved so far and everything's so radically different. But with this, these deformers sit in parallel to all of that. So even if we do a simulation, and let's just, I'm going to look at my simulation settings real quick, and I do not want it running from a memorized pose. So let's just run a simulation for a moment. And if this takes too long, I may pause the video and then come back to it. But here, okay, here you can see it's draping. Our simulation is running. And I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that simulation right there because I like where it's landed. Okay, so here you have the simulation is ran up to that point. I've canceled it because I like where we're at right there. It's actually a pretty nice look. But if I wanted to add a little bit more movement, I could go into my dress controls here. Let's go to front left, and you'll see that that control doesn't conflict at all with the simulation. It plays with it very nicely. So we could add even more little nuances to it before or after a sim. Now, the other thing that I want to show you before I close up actually has nothing to do with those, but it's another little, just something I thought was kind of a cool little extra. And this has to do with the materials. So most of these material settings, and you'll see that this kit comes with a nice selection. There's 4 different all-over looks for this kit. But one thing that's in here that is not hierarchical, the rest of these all, you can just select your Genesis 8 female and apply them, and they apply as hierarchical materials, and they'll do the entire outfit. However, I've included one called Top Lace, and what this does is if we select the drop shoulder top, and I'm just right-clicking and selecting that here, no matter what material you have on this, if we apply, then it will turn that into lace. So if I go into Array right now, and I'm just going to go back to the G8 female and reset this all to the original kind of pink lavender sort of color. Okay. And now if I select the drop shoulder top and apply the lace, you'll see that it converts major panels of this into lace. The nice thing about the way this works is that if you were to paint up your own textures and make your own materials for this outfit, for that top, and then decide you'd like to see them converted to lace, this will convert anything that's applied to it to lace, because what that is doing, it's actually just applying an opacity map into the geometry channel, the opacity channel under geometry. And that's the only thing it affects. So whatever else you set up stays intact. So I just wanted to show that though, because it's not a hierarchical material. So if you select just the Genesis 8 female and try to apply that, it's not going to work. You have to select specifically the drop shoulder top and apply that there. So that's going to bring this video to a close. I hope you enjoy this kit and have fun playing with it. Make some really interesting artwork. Till I do another video and that sort of thing to illustrate whatever other crazy things I have going on in kits that I'm bringing to you folks at DAS. I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this stuff. Make some great artwork. Thanks.